How did a brilliant businessman become such a disturbing menace? Dive into the mind of Norman Osborn and witness the progression from a brilliant intellect to a tormented psyche. Get ready to deeply understand the metamorphosis that led him to embody the Green Goblin. To understand Norman Osborn's complex journey, we need to go back to the beginning, his life before the shadow of the Green Goblin manifested. Norman wasn't just a businessman. He was a visionary, the founder of Oscorp, a company he propelled to the top with his intelligence and relentless ambition. However, behind the facade of success and innovation, intense pressures simmered alongside an incessant quest for validation. He operated in a predatory corporate environment where failure wasn't an option and competition was brutal. This atmosphere fueled his need to always be the best, the smartest, the indisputably superior. Even at this stage, we could discern the initial psychological traits that would be crucial in his future transformation. There was a grandiose self-image, a deep conviction of his own genius, which, while driving, also isolated him. He saw himself as above others, with a mindset that, in psychology, could be associated with a certain narcissism, not necessarily pathological, but a strong sense of personal importance and a constant need for admiration. This characteristic led him to take calculated risks, but also to disregard the well-being of others for his own goals. The pressure to keep Oscorp at the forefront, to surpass his rivals, and to validate his own vision was a cauldron where his personality began to be unpredictably shaped. He was a genius, yes, but a genius under colossal pressure, with a mind that already showed an inclination to seek power and recognition at any cost. He often found himself in a technological arms race, where every discovery was a step towards consolidating his dominance and warding off competition. This all-or-nothing mentality planted the seeds for future imbalance. But there were elements within him that foreshadowed a turbulent future, something no one, not even he, saw coming. What triggered the profound change in Norman Osborn? The crucial breaking point occurred in the Oscorp lab with the infamous Goblin Serum. The intention was to create a physical and mental enhancement serum, an innovation that would guarantee the company's superiority and, more importantly, cement Norman's image as an unparalleled genius. He saw this as the solution to all his problems of competitiveness and personal validation. However, the experiment, rushed and unstable due to his own impatience and desire for immediate results, went terribly wrong. Instead of enhancing him in a controlled manner, the serum acted as a catalyst for his pre-existing psychological vulnerabilities. This was the trigger, a traumatic event that destabilized his mind. The chemical and biological overload acted upon a psyche already fragile from years of stress, unrestrained ambition, and an inflated self-image. An internal split began to manifest. The persona of Norman Osborn, the businessman and father, started to disintegrate, giving way to a new, chaotic, and destructive identity. The internal conflict was palpable. His rational consciousness struggled against irrational and violent impulses emerging from his subconscious. He found himself debating with himself, with an increasingly assertive and malevolent inner voice gaining ground. Externally, this change translated into erratic behavior, disproportionate outbursts of rage, a growing paranoia towards his competitors and even his own employees, and an inability to maintain healthy relationships. His personality became volatile, unpredictable. From a psychological perspective, this transformation can be understood as the manifestation of a dissociative disorder, where a part of the psyche separates from the main consciousness, or even a borderline personality disorder, exacerbated by the serum's neurochemistry, leading to extreme mood swings, impulsivity, and a distorted perception of reality. The serum didn't create evil, but it removed the barriers Norman had built to contain it, unleashing latent traits of aggression, megalomania, and an uncontrollable need for control and domination. It was the moment the mask of respectability began to crack, revealing the instability beneath, and the Green Goblin persona began to take shape. And it was at that instant that the structures of his sanity began to weaken, paving the way for the emergence of something much darker. With the serum coursing through his veins, Norman Osborn's mind didn't just weaken. It began to mold itself into a new, disturbing structure. It wasn't just a sudden burst of madness, but a controlled, albeit distorted, evolution of his psyche. The new persona, which would come to be known as the Green Goblin, began to consolidate its dominance over the old Norman. The moments when Norman's light tried to reassert itself became increasingly rare and feeble. Facts and statements revealed the emergence of this new way of thinking. His obsession with humiliating and destroying Spider-Man, whom he saw not just as an obstacle, but as a symbol of the order and morality, he now despised and wished to dismantle. His actions shifted from calculated to openly sadistic, demonstrating a cruel and perverse pleasure in the misfortune of others, a trait classically associated with severe personality disorders. To bring the audience inside the Goblin's head, it's essential to understand that he operated with his own logic, perverted yet coherent within his own universe. He didn't see himself as a villain, but as a liberator, an agent of chaos who would expose the hypocrisy and fragility of society. His distorted mind made him believe that his actions were justified, that the end justified the most brutal means. His grandiosity amplified, leading him to believe that only he possessed the intelligence and vision necessary to correct the world. From a psychological standpoint, we can observe the emergence of psychopathic and sociopathic traits. A lack of empathy, calculated manipulation, the pursuit of absolute power and control, and a complete disregard for social norms and laws became evident. The Green Goblin felt no remorse. He felt triumph and a kind of exhilaration in his ability to cause panic and destruction. We can draw a parallel with the concept of a distorted strategic mind. He planned, anticipated, and reacted, but his plans were always oriented towards chaos, personal domination, and anarchy. It wasn't uncontrolled frenzy, but a sharp intellect aimed at systematic destruction. This new mental structure wasn't a flaw, but a grotesque adaptation, a system of beliefs that allowed him to operate with extreme cruelty and effectiveness. He became, in his own perception, the purest and most potent version of himself, free from social and moral constraints. However, the full extent of this transformation was yet to come, and the true, even darker monster was still dormant within his essence, ready to reveal itself completely. We've reached Norman Osborn's point of no return, the act of total transgression that sealed his fate as the Green Goblin. This wasn't just a simple crime, but a conscious choice, albeit influenced by his already altered mind, to embrace the dark side of his own psyche. The exact moment might vary across narratives, but it always involves a calculated and brutal attack that severs any remaining ties to his former humanity. It could be an assault on innocent people, the destruction of something he once cherished, like his own company, or the deliberate revelation of his identity to Spider-Man with the explicit intention of inflicting deep psychological suffering, not just physical harm. He sought to destabilize Spider-Man by hitting him where it hurt the most. At this stage, his worldview shifts completely. He is no longer Norman Osborn trying to control the Goblin. He's the Green Goblin, and Norman is merely a convenient shell, an inconvenient memory of a life he now considers weak and irrelevant. Morality and ethics completely dissolve. For the Goblin, destruction is not a mistake, but a necessity, a means to a grand end that only he can envision. He rationalizes his cruel acts as purification, as revealing the truth about power and human weakness. He sees himself as a predator in a world of prey, and this view frees him from any guilt, remorse, or hesitation. He delights in the chaos he creates. Here, we can bring the audience to a disturbing dilemma. What if, in his twisted logic, there was a kind of reason? Though shocking, the Green Goblin operates with a brutality that, to him, makes perfect sense. He no longer possesses empathy, but he has a sharp intellect that he uses to manipulate and destroy, turning people's lives into a chessboard for his sadistic games. Cruelty becomes a tool, chaos an art form. He feels invincible, untouchable, and anyone who challenges him is merely a pawn to be discarded. This is the moment when the Green Goblin transcends the figure of a common villain to become a catalyst for despair and disorder, a being who embraces his new identity with relentless and unapologetic ferocity. From this point, there was no turning back. The point of no return had been crossed, and chaos had become his only compass, leading him down a path of ruin for himself and everyone he encountered. In this chapter, we delve deeper into the psychological analysis of the Green Goblin, revealing how, behind the apparent madness, there is a disturbing logic and a methodology for his destruction. This isn't a random psychotic break, but the extreme manifestation of an antisocial personality disorder, combined with traits of pathological narcissism and megalomania, exacerbated by the serum. The Green Goblin doesn't act impulsively without purpose. He has clear objectives: to exert absolute power, to humiliate his enemies, and to prove his own superiority at all costs. His obsession with Spider-Man is a classic example of target fixation, where the destruction of the other becomes his self-validation. We can use real studies and theories to validate his behavior. For instance, cognitive psychology helps us understand how his perception of reality is distorted. He filters information to confirm his grandiose beliefs and disregards anything that contradicts him. He sees weakness where there is compassion and strength where there is tyranny. This cognitive distortion allows him to justify the most heinous acts. The malignant narcissism model describes individuals with characteristics of narcissism, antisocial behavior, aggression, and paranoia, a chillingly accurate fit for the Green Goblin. His incessant pursuit of conflict with Spider-Man can be interpreted as a way to validate his own existence and power, because a great hero demands a great antagonist, and he sees himself as the ultimate antagonist, the only one capable of challenging and breaking Spider-Man's morale. Comparisons can be drawn, in terms of behavior, with individuals who exhibited destructive behaviors with an internal, albeit aberrant, logic where the absence of empathy combines with functional intelligence. The Goblin's cruelty is not gratuitous. It's a tool to destabilize, to control through fear, and to assert his dominance. Every move, every trap, every sadistic comment is part of a larger plan, a complex psychological game he believes he is winning, always one step ahead of his adversaries. He revels in witnessing the despair and confusion he causes. It wasn't disorganized madness, a mere breakdown. It was cold, precise, and horrifyingly rational calculation within his own distorted worldview, an architecture of terror built within his fragmented mind. What remains after the Green Goblin's passage? His legacy is not merely one of physical destruction, of crumbling buildings or lost lives, but of a profound psychological impact that irreversibly shapes the world around him. For Spider-Man, the Green Goblin becomes the ultimate enemy, not just because of the physical threat, but because he represents the corruption of innocence, the most painful loss, and the inevitability of confronting the darkest side of human nature. The Goblin's existence alters the perception of safety in New York City, sowing widespread fear and distrust. He demonstrates that the line between genius and perversion can be incredibly thin, and that evil can emerge from where it's least expected. Discussing real or fictional consequences leads us to ponder the nature of evil and how it manifests. The Green Goblin serves as a twisted mirror to humanity itself: ambition without limits that can corrode the soul, corporate pressure that leads to desperate choices, and the way the mind can deviate under extreme conditions. His story raises a deep philosophical and moral reflection. Who are we to judge the complexity of a mind that fragments under the weight of its own creations and pressures? especially when that mind was once considered brilliant. This question doesn't seek to absolve his actions, but rather to invite understanding of the layers that led to this transformation, and to recognize that, at times, human fragility is fertile ground for the emergence of monsters. The Green Goblin is not just a villain. He's an archetype of the fallen genius, a constant reminder that intellect without ethics and empathy can be a terribly destructive force. His influence doesn't end with his defeat. It lingers in the minds of his adversaries, in the memories of the city he terrorized, and in the very concept of villainy within the Marvel Universe. His story is a cycle, a dark lesson that repeats. The cycle of uncontrolled ambition, dangerous experimentation, and the manifestation of inner darkness. The legacy of chaos he left continues to echo, showing that the perversion of a brilliant mind can be the most dangerous threat of all. And perhaps he was not the last to tread this disturbing path, always leaving the question hanging in the air about where else brilliance might transform into torment. Our journey through the mind of Norman Osborn, who transformed into the Green Goblin, reveals a dark truth. The abyss of madness is often paved with the best intentions and the grandest ambitions. The Green Goblin's story forces us to confront the fragility of the human psyche and the dangers of boundless ambition. Could it be that, somewhere, the genius and the monster are more connected than we imagine? And what would be the cost of that connection?